Anuja and Satish. So nice of you to join in to be the presentation, to have the presentation today from a chief auditor. Summer Audit Systems and Software Private Limited, we brought this series, basically to ensure that experiences, good practices of chief auditors or internal audit professionals in the field of, whether they're educators or they are, regulators, they bring it up in this series, and that can be beneficial to students and the internal audit fraternity.
See, this idea was just to bring, all these ideas back into for students and for posterity. Obviously, there may be a few things which you will not be able to share, which we are absolutely cognizant of. So that's okay. But at least if this is a platform which will help in future for budding auditors as well. And not only chartered accountants, but even engineers. We've got such good feedback, even from engineers who have benefited from the past programs. So that is what we are looking forward to.
I'll formally introduce Anuja for the benefit of our audience. Anuja Ramdasi is a chartered accountant and a certified fraud examiner with over 17 years of experience in risk management, internal audit, corporate governance, and compliances. She has got a varied work experience in consulting services in her early days of her career, and then over the last decade, she has moved to industry. So she has been associated with IT multinationals and is recognized for her understanding and acumen of the challenges and opportunities of the IT industry. She's consulting experience spans several multinationals like Unilever, Wipro, Tata Motors, BMC Software, where she was actively engaged in internal audit assignments. And after moving to industry, she managed the internal audit and compliance function for the India entity of Allscripts Healthcare, leading MNC in healthcare IT domain for over 8 years. And in her current role, she is the global head of internal audit for Persistent Systems Ltd, and a leader in digital, which is a leader in a fast-growing IT services company and a leader in digital engineering. Besides audit, she is also an active member of the ethics committee for the organization. She has a keen interest in forensic accounting and has led investigations involving financial and operational frauds of varying size and nature as a part of various assignments. She has also been an active member of the internal committee for prevention of sexual harassment at workplaces in her organization. She is also an active member of the board of governors of Pune Audit Club of IIA, Institute of Internal Auditors, India. She is a regular speaker and contributor at various professional forums like IIA and ICAI. And in her humble desire to give back to the profession, she also is engaged with Symbiosis University for selection and mentoring of the students for their 2 years Masters in Banking and Finance program since the last 4 years. So a very impressive profile, a very good work being done by her. So over to you, Anuja.
Yes. Thank you, Deepji. Thank you, Satishji. And, listening to our own profile and introduction from esteemed people like you actually makes me feel that, oh, wow, is that really me? I mean, have I really been doing all these things? So thank you so much for this introduction. And, I have been watching this CAE series very diligently right from the time Mr. Dua came in, and I don't think probably I've missed a single episode, and you guys are doing a phenomenal job. So thank you for that. And in fact, it's actually a very good, learning point even for my team. And I'll speak about it as we progress in the discussion today. But yeah, I mean, I can't actually begin to thank you enough for putting up this series together. And there's so much to learn and share from the fraternity and the experiences. So yes, we look forward to many more such sessions, Deepji and Satishji.
And we look forward to your session.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for inviting me here. Yeah. So, before I actually begin my presentation, what peculiarly I would like to do when I speak about internal audit and how we have been carrying out internal audit in Persistent Systems, it's going to be a little interesting because I will be talking about the journey of Persistent in the last 5 years. Sure. And I have been associated with Persistent for last 5 years. So what all I have seen in Persistent and how both Persistent, Anuja as the head of internal audit and the internal audit team, how we have grown together is quite a bit of an interesting journey. So I would like to believe that everyone finds this story very interesting.
Sure.
Yeah. So I'll be just sharing my screen. Please let me know once it's visible. Yeah, is the screen visible?
Not yet.
Not yet.
I think there's sometimes a lag.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is it visible now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah, as I said, I would be speaking a little about Persistent and how Persistent has evolved in the last 5 years. It's more than a 30-year-old company, Pune headquartered company. We are into IT services, of course, as Deepji mentioned. And so it's a 30-year-old company, but especially the journey has been very interesting in the last few years. So I'll be talking about that. Then I'll be speaking about, as I said, how I and the team have evolved in Persistent. Yeah. So little about Persistent. I think we already spoke about Persistent being an IT services company, and very specifically, if we look at this chart, I mean, what began in Q4 FY20 at a negative growth. Today, we are at a 9.2% quarter-on-quarter growth. And also, if you look at the headcount, I mean, the revenue is phenomenal. We have had change of leadership, change of board members, and I'll speak about that as we speak further. But this is just a chart to show you how we have grown, especially in the last few quarters. And we are running towards the $1 billion company very soon. That's the dream that our CEO and the entire leadership team carries, which cascades down to all of us, of course. FY20, we were at 10K headcount. FY21, we were at 13K plus headcount. And today we are almost 17K plus. So, and this is in the times of the great resignations, the high attrition that's happening in the IT industry. So this is the net headcount that we're talking about, which is increasing multifold. So that's where the Persistent journey is. And just for the benefit of all, when I talk about the Indian IT services space, some of the more known logos or more known companies whom we call as our peers, some of them are larger peers and some of them are mid-cap peers like us, are the TCS and the Infosys and the Cognizants of the world. So these are some of our peer companies whom we look up to, which most of us would probably be able to identify with some of the names that are here. Just to get a sense of what business Persistent is into, this is what it is. And I take a lot of pride in sharing this specific chart here. So 8th March 2021, just exactly 1 year ago, the share price stood at around 1600 odd. And today, if you look up the chart, we are at more than 4,400. So that's the that's the growth and that's the progress we are talking about. I'm not even going to talk about FY20 where we were at probably 400 or 500 per share. I'm not even talking about that. I'm just talking about the journey of last 4 quarters. So the reason to give all this background is because I just want to put in perspective at what pace the organization is growing, and naturally. At the same pace, internal audit is expected to, expand their horizons. I mean, I can only begin to tell and you can only begin to imagine how the materiality levels must have gone changing, how the priorities, how the risks that the organization considers and perceives, every quarter on quarter have been changing with this kind of phenomenal growth that we are talking about. Persistent as an organization believes in 3 great mantras: resilience, relationships, and reinvention. And I as an internal auditor, or we as an internal audit team of Persistent, coincidentally absolutely resonate with these 3 R's. And you will see how resilience, relationships, and reinventions are something which we as a internal audit team of Persistent have used as our success mantras in the organization. Okay. We can begin with some basics. This is a simple internal audit basic reporting structure. It's not different from any other organization that I report directly to the audit committee of the board. We have an in-house team. Of course, we do have some assignments which we co-source with the external consultants. But what is the peculiarity about the internal audit team at Persistent? I will speak as we move ahead. Besides internal audit, there are a couple of other assurance groups within Persistent as an organization. Obviously, the operational reviews and the internal financial controls totally lie within the ambit and purview of the core corporate audit group, which is headed by me. In addition to that, we also have a couple of internal assurance groups like the delivery and operations excellence. As I said, we are an IT services company, so people and talent management is our key, key raw material, if I may call it, or key resources are people for us. So a lot of churning in and out and delivery of the projects and all of that keeps on happening. So delivery and operations excellence is of utmost importance to us. Then, of course, the information security, the data privacy, and the GDPRs of the world. So these are, we have to be constantly on our toes when it comes to information security. And naturally, like any and every other organization, we have to have a compliance office. So all these three are the other assurance groups within the organization. Why I've put them here is because when it comes to reporting, though the ones in the red, that is the delivery and ops excellence, information security and compliance office, do not directly fall under the purview of internal audit, or the internal audit is not directly responsible for them for their operations is concerned. But when it comes to the audit committee reporting or the board reporting, this all aligns into a single report, which is presented by me. So I work with my delivery and operations excellence head. I work with my CISO. I work with my chief compliance officer and get a good understanding of where we are. And these groups internally also themselves have their own audit teams who work independently on the reviews and operations. So I devise their audit plans along with them. And I do a complete reporting. I am not operationally responsible for them, but we do have a consolidated reporting when it comes to the audit committee. Now, this has been very well appreciated by the audit committee because they get a very good sense and glimpse of what's happening at the overall assurance level within the organization. Okay, we also have a very unique quarterly reporting protocol, which obviously has evolved quarter on quarter as we have moved ahead. And this was not what it originally started, 3-4 years back. It was not this way. We did have multiple ways of reporting and how we actually reported to the audit committee, what were the level of internal reviews that were happening. But today, we have ironed out all the creases, and you will see that what is the level and involvement right up to the audit committee chairman and my chairman and MD, Dr. Anand Deshpande, as well as my CEO, CFO, how well we are connected and aligned, and what is the big buy-in that internal audit has today at the board level. So every quarter we do have independent reviews, one-on-one with the audit committee chairman. I have a one-on-one independent review with the audit committee chairman, one independent review with the chairman and MD. Then we have a very detailed senior leadership review where I have my CEO, my CFO, along with the other key CXOs within the organization. I have named a few of them here who definitely are a part of these leadership review meetings. In addition, and I'm not even beginning to talk about the function heads and all of that, because that I believe would probably be happening in each and every organization, irrespective of the industry. So this is purely the senior leadership reviews that I'm talking about. So everyone right up to the audit committee chairman, the CMD, all of them are absolutely involved in the audit, internal audit observations. Now, after these individual meetings, we also have something that we call as pre-audit committee discussions, where the same set of senior leadership meets along with the audit committee chairman and myself for any discussions that need to happen before the audit committee meeting. Now, this actually allows us to have some extremely healthy discussions, extremely healthy points of views that would be raised, or the challenges that each of these CXOs may be a talent management related issue or a delivery related issue, whatever are their issues that the CXOs identify in probably taking up a particular recommendation that has been made by an internal audit team. Or if the audit committee chairman has any specific concerns or specific issues, these all get absolutely very well transparently handled and discussed in these meetings. So that has actually evolved over time. And today, this has actually been, our mantra of coming up with extremely meaningful meetings and meaningful output out of the internal audit observations. Yeah, talking about the learnings in the last 5 years, as I said, I've been associated with Persistent for just over a little over 5 years now. So basically, when I joined Persistent, I was the first external internal auditor that the organization had in the last 25 years. When I say that, I mean that the internal auditors that were appointed, the head of internal audits that preceded me, were all internal people. They were either coming from the finance team or coming from the operations team. Or when Persistent had an IPO, the CFO himself, very graciously at that point of time had stepped out of the CFO role and managed the internal audit function, and we had got an intermittent CFO come in place. So that was one of the biggest challenges, and I'll speak about it as we move forward. Then there has been interesting. I showed you the journey of how Persistent has evolved and grown exponentially in the last few years. I have seen three CEOs in the last 5 years. A change of audit committee chairman, a couple of audit committee members have changed, and of course we have all seen the pandemic, which has probably completely changed the way we work and definitely changed the way we audit. So all of these have been really interesting. Few learnings which I hold very dear to my heart, which are precious to me, and I would definitely want to speak about them. As I said, I was the first external internal auditor, or somebody who is an internal audit professional and has entered the organization. So there were definitely a lot of preconceived notions. There were a lot of expectations to be managed over there. So that journey has been very, very interesting. The leadership has been very supportive over there. What I learned over there and what I still carry along with me is that as internal auditors, we essentially need to have an extremely deep positive intent in any engagement that we take up. Having a completely unbiased view. And actually that actually worked to my advantage, because I did not carry any baggages. I did not carry any notions about any of my auditees or any of my team members or any of the leadership. So that actually helped me over there to build some extremely good relationships and extremely good rapport with the existing leadership team as well as the functions. Now, what also helps as an internal auditor, and what helped me definitely is finding the right balance between empathy and assertiveness. Persistent is a global MNC, but we are headquartered in Pune. So for a long time, it was being operated as a closely held company. And that's when, I'm sure a lot of us would resonate with me that's it, especially the internal auditors. We do get to hear these kind of comments a lot of times that big boss knows this, or the boss knows this, or the CEO knows this. So and that's why this is okay. I will still continue to do it the way I am going to be doing it. So it's always essential for an internal auditor to strike the right balance between showing or exhibiting empathy as well as being extremely assertive about the findings or the discussions or the recommendations. So that right balance I have learned to find here, and that I think is a very, very important for any internal auditor, especially if it's an organization which is growing at an accelerated pace and is no longer that closely held company where you ask the boss and you do anything and everything which is probably going to be taken as right. So no, we are no longer that organization, and that's not how we want to operate. And hence taking along the functions and taking along the leadership with you, getting their buy-in by striking the right balance between empathy and assertiveness has actually helped a long way. Then definitely 360 degrees thinking. We have to and essentially have to think of every person asking this question, that what is in it for me? So any statement I make at whatever level as an internal audit head, may it be towards the function head, may it be towards the CXO or the audit committee chairman or the CMD, or even to my team for that matter. So knowing what is in it for them, going up to the level that probably the accounts executive wants to hear, right up to what the audit committee chairman wants to hear. So understanding, the wavelength and understanding and establishing that wavelength is something which we have been practicing, and that has actually done wonders for us. And the last point, Satish ji, I've borrowed from what I read in one of your posts this morning. And yes, I am a follower of your posts too. So yeah, and that actually struck a chord with me, that focus less on what you need to do. As internal auditors, we are so focused on, I need to bring out, what is going wrong within the organization, and I need to show that this needs to be this way and all of that. But what we essentially need to focus on, and what is the recipe for success as an internal auditor, is what we need to be to the organization, what the organization needs from us. And rather than thinking or believing in the typical traditional role of an internal auditor or of a fault finder, as many of our auditees or many of our stakeholders like to call us. So yeah, so these are some of the things which have been absolutely precious for me. Coming to a strong in-house internal audit team. Why I decided to bring up this point here is because if you look at the internal audit functions in the IT industry, especially in the IT services industry, you would find that most of the organizations, most of the logos that you saw some time back, which I showed as my peers, the TCS, Infosys, and Wipros and TechMs of the world, most of them would have a outsourced, largely a outsourced internal audit function. Persistent has broken the barrier there. Not to say that these people do not have internal audit teams. They have extremely lean teams. They would probably have an internal audit head. Most of them definitely do not even have an internal audit head. Most of them, you would find that get one of these big fours to represent, even in the audit committee, present the reports, even in the audit committee meetings. So what Persistent has done is, it has completely broken this barrier. We are probably one amongst the very few companies, the IT services companies, who have a completely in-house team. It has taken a lot of effort from the management, my predecessors, including me, and we have a wonderful team which is there today. It's a lean team. We are not a very big team. We of course go to our co-sourcing partners as and when we need their help. But this is definitely a USP that Persistent is very proud of. That our management, our senior leadership believes in giving opportunities to internal members, encouraging an insider view of, because we believe that what an insider would know of what is going right or wrong within the organization, what having an internal team will give opportunities to the internal talent. An internal audit is a function which kind of encompasses all the functions within an organization. So of course, we are not like the GEs of the world, where the internal audit, the CAS as they call it, corporate audit team, which is like a stepping stone into the rest of the functions. We are not that big, but that's probably one of the thoughts in the minds of the leadership and I as an internal audit head, when we have invested so much in having an in-house team. Now, to have an in-house team, we have worked on what should be the right combination of an internal audit team if we are planning to have an in-house team. So we definitely need someone, and we have someone who brings in an insider view or insider perspective. So someone who has worked in the organization for 25 plus years out of the 30 years that the organization exists today, as a completely inside view on the people, on the processes and platforms, all of the way they have been evolved. And trust me, there is no substitute to this knowledge that this team member brings in. Then we have someone who has joined us from the Big Fours, who has a very good industry awareness, very good understanding of the practices and the way the audits are conducted in the most professional manner. And then, like any and every other internal audit team, we also have people from multi backgrounds. Like we have, obviously we have chartered accountants, we have MBAs, we have CISAs, who bring in the technical expertise that are needed to carry out the audits. As I mentioned, we are a good mix. We learn from each other, and we are well aware that we are here trying to break some norm and trying to work as an in-house team in an industry which is largely has this function as a completely outsourced model. So definitely it is the responsibility of each and every of my team member along with me to stay connected, to stay networked. And I'm going to directly jump to the last bullet here, where what we have devised a model where each one of these 6 team members picks up and studies one of our peer companies in detail, and then we share and learn. So we know what is happening with 6 to 7 of our peers. What are the best practices that are happening around our industry? What are the best practices that we can replicate? So all this kind of information essentially has to be on the tips of the team members before making any recommendations or coming up with any audit findings that are there. Because especially in the IT industry, there is a high, and especially the way Persistent works and the Persistent leadership and board works, there is a high amount of weightage and reliance that is placed on following the peers, following the industry trends that are there, because IT being a high-tech industry is ever evolving. So the practices keep changing, may it be for the enabling functions, may it be for the delivery organizations, may it be for the software platforms. So we are a highly evolved and evolving industry, so to speak. So for that matter, the entire discussions that keep happening at the management and board level are obviously to keep up with the peers, keep up with the best practices. So we, as the internal auditors of Persistent, have also adopted this style, and it is working very well for us, where we also stay updated with what are the happenings. And there's a lot of hard work that the team does to get around this. We are very, very thankful to the different programs that IIA, ICAI, and the CAE series. I was mentioning earlier that we do watch each and every episode of these kind of programs that come up. Probably it might connect the dots now as to why that is important and why the team is so evolved. I mean, we also then take up discussions in some of our team meetings as to who learned what from which program they attended or which workshop they attended. So these are the kind of things which we have to keep doing. Also extremely important is networking within and outside the organization. So you would find me or my team members never shying away from picking up the phone and making connections and talking to people, expressing that what are the challenges they are facing, helping the other peers address their challenges. Equally same within the organization, irrespective of whether we are auditing a particular area or not. So networking within and outside the organization is an integral part of this in-house team. So, and as I said, all this is essential because we do not directly have the privilege and advantages of having an outsourced internal audit function where we by default would get access to the best practices that are happening across industries. We are an in-house team, we are an internal team, and hence all these efforts are extremely essential and an integral part of the work that is being done. Now, what has worked for Persistent internal audit? As I said, I have been looking up this CAE series, and other than the CAE series also, in my research of reaching out to multiple senior professionals in the IA fraternity, reaching out to multiple IA heads for a lot of research activities, like how is the risk management function working in your organization? How are risk-based internal audits working in your organization? And so on and so forth. I keep doing these kind of question answers with all my industry friends. So, and as I saw in the CAE series also, I saw that a lot of internal audit functions, I mean, definitely what come at the top of my mind are definitely Swaminathan from Godrej. And then we also had Mr. Rajesh from SR, who I was so impressed with the kind of portfolios that these internal audit heads handle in their organizations, and how well respected these functions are. So that's phenomenal. I mean, it really makes you believe in the function. What happens at Persistent is a little different. Internal audit is a totally independent function, as I showed in my earlier charts also, that there are different assurance functions that are there within the organization. At the same time, we also, and risk management was not mentioned in that chart, but of course, risk management is also a separate function that's existing, and that is not within the purview of internal audit. But that actually has worked as a boon in disguise for me and the team. We are not directly having responsibility of any of these activities within the organization. But come to think of it, we are actually, by that grace, involved in each and every of these activities that happen, because we largely cover it as a part of the overall internal audit requirements. So what we have done is we have been keeping changing hats as and when required. So in my dialogue with the chief planning officer, or in my dialogue with this chief finance officer or the corporate development officer, the moment we come to know that there is a particular thing that's happening within the organization, or there is something that needs attention, or even for that matter, a ERP implementation, the moment we know that there's a ERP implementation that's going to happen, internal audit by default gets involved. Now, it is not a set or a designate or a mandate from the leadership or from the audit committee that internal audit has to get involved. It's not a direct responsibility of the internal audit function. But because there are no designated responsibilities, we find ourselves by default getting involved in each and every of these activities, key activities that happen within the organization. What we have also learned to do is as I mentioned, we have had 2 CEOs, 2 audit committee chairmen in the last 5 years. And each one has had a very, very different, each one has come with a wealth of knowledge and experience, and each of them has also come in with a completely different perspective and a mindset and expectations from the internal audit function. So some of them preferred really long, reports in Word documents spreading across 40, 50 pages. And some of them preferred actually very crisp 5 to 7 slides of presentations, providing a complete overview of what are the kind of observations that we have. So the team has got adapted to providing each and every kind of reports as required or as requested by the stakeholders. It has taken time. It takes time to understand the stakeholder mindset, but the moment you know it, the moment you grow together, then that's a recipe for success that has worked for us. Another thing which we have definitely done is, yes, we do develop annual audit plans. We do have standard risk-based audit plans that we revive every year, and we make a 3-year plan, and then we make an annual plan and all. But we do not insist on sticking to it. So my audit plan is as dynamic as what is going to be important for my organization, my industry in the next quarter. I keep taking these tips from what's happening around the world. I keep taking these tips from what's going wrong within the organization right now. I keep taking tips from my CXOs, my CMD, my audit committee chairman, and we have a dynamic and evolving internal audit plan every quarter on quarter. So while I know that these 2 areas I will definitely want to cover in the next quarter, I will also always keep a room and space for anything that my CXOs or my audit committee chairman will ask me to do. And I will also keep a space for an area or 2, which I would suggest on my own, understanding what is going to be critical in the upcoming days as an audit area. So this is the way we have, a agile approach to what areas do we need to audit. Proactively bringing the best practices to the table, as I think I've already spoken about this. What are the challenges in the peer industry? A continuous learning, continuously providing inputs to the audit committee, on what internal audit needs to focus on. What are the challenges that the industry is facing? Providing these kind of inputs, I think, has been the USP of Persistent Internal Audit team. Also, the most important thing, the last but not the least, is that the way we report issues, we do not merely report an issue as an audit finding. That part we would have probably, completed halfway through the quarter, identifying the issues. But the next half of the quarter, what we concentrate on is getting our hands dirty along with the function heads and identifying how do we resolve this issue. That is something which is much appreciated by the function heads, by the management, and by the audit committee. So that when a report is put up in front of the audit committee, we speak about not only the issues, but also how we have dealt with it, how the functions have dealt with it, or how the functions have geared up, what measures they have planned to address this particular issue. Not a single observation that goes reported to the audit committee is left hanging in the air with, not having a proper closure plan or a proper mitigation plan. And I was mentioning about these pre-AC discussions and involving all the CXOs. So that actually those brainstorming discussions help us to put together a full-fledged report and make a very meaningful presentation to the audit committee. This is my last slide where I would be talking about what are some of the unique things that we have done as a Persistent internal audit function. As I was mentioning, we have a very agile audit plan. We have certain specific audit areas that we definitely audit. But what has worked for us is we rely heavily on what are the external triggers that we need to keep a tab on and how we have encashed them or how we have converted them into audit engagements or audit assignments or audit reviews. And here are some of the examples. Like the immigration and visa compliance. I know it's a very critical audit area when it comes to the IT industry because we have people flying all over the world at all points of time. So especially in the times when there was a change of, when there were presidential elections and when there was a change from Trump to Biden, those were the times when a lot of immigration and visa rules kept changing. So those were the times when we actually hired external experts and got these kind of reviews done beforehand, before the change of guards, that what is it that we are anticipating as an organization. So while we may not do the internal audit in-house essentially in such situations, we work with our functions and our consultants and we design the audit plan, but we take the help from the external experts and try and identify what needs to be or how Persistent needs to be geared up, where we are not prepared and what are the loopholes that we need to plug in. Now, when we encountered an incident in one of the IT companies in Pune, where there were issues and it became a national news when it came to employee safety at workplace, we immediately brought out that audit. We carried out those kind of things. So some of them could be reactive in nature, some of them would be proactive in nature, but we ensure that we always keep space and room for these kind of reviews. The employee grievance handling mechanism, with the way the dollar movements are happening, and especially in the times of the year when there is a tremendous forex fluctuation, those are the times when we time our treasury operations. And I would like to definitely speak about one enlightening incident that happened at the beginning of the pandemic. And I'm going to be very honest here. I was, when the pandemic hit, and it was, I believe, early April 2020, and I was honestly lost that, okay, now what is internal audit going to do in all this process? And that was when I just decided to attend, some random session that was there. And I heard Mr. Nagesh Pinge speaking in that session, and he is definitely one of my mentors. I do go to him whenever I need any advice, and he's a close friend of my audit committee chairman as well. And he asked some extremely pertinent questions there, that what, as internal auditors, is your management coming to you? Are you just sitting there and lying low and not knowing what internal audit is supposed to do in this whole pandemic situation, when everyone is running from pillar to post, trying to identify what needs to be done? And that was a totally enlightening experience for me. And that's when I proactively got into discussions with the leadership within the organization, thought of what all different functions might be affected in which way. And we actually carried out, absolutely unplanned reviews, like what are going to be the post working conditions in the post pandemic scenario? How prepared are we for a remote working scenario? So these were the kind of things which were the need of the hour, and which actually worked so well. I mean, these are not your traditional audit areas, or these were probably not even on the plan. But these are some of the things which we came up with, and which worked very well with the, probably not as much with the audit committee, but more with the management, because they actually drew so much inputs from what we had to tell them to help them connect the dots of which functions need attention where. So these are definitely some of the things, or the external triggers that I want to talk about, which we have actually encashed in, giving value add inputs to the management. And then, of course, there are internal or regulatory triggers, like we have whistleblower programs. They are run in every organization, Persistent being no exception. But the moment the need for having a robust whistleblower program and the reporting in CARO by the statutory auditors kicked in, that was the time when, as a pre-alert, we actually did all this checking ourselves, whether the persistent whistleblower program, how effective it is, what is happening, what needs to change. So these are some of the internal or regulatory triggers that I'm talking about. When the wage code, it is yet probably to see the light of the day, but it's a lot talked about in the past, at least a couple of years now. So how well prepared is persistent payroll and employee benefits program to take care of the wage code and the labor code that is there? So these are some of the things which we worked on. IT industry, very, very heavily and highly prone to mergers and acquisitions. Persistent is also on an acquisition spree right now. So the moment we know that any such kind of discussions are happening within the organization, what kind of due diligence is required, a pre and a post-ops review, what are the different contract compliance management requirements that happen when you take over contracts of the acquired entity. The moment we know that in a particular geography, especially in India, we know that, typically this PF audits or GST audits, once they start or once they trigger in a particular industry or in a particular geography, then probably no organization or no MNC worth a particular turnover would be, left alone. So the moment you know that these kind of triggers are going to come in, and all this, actually, we actually get to know of all of these things because we have managed to keep that kind of a widespread network and, keep all our hands and legs across the network and know what's really happening in the industry. So these kind of triggers also, we ensure that we alert the management, we help them in getting internal reviews done. The social media exposure, there's so much is being talked about Persistent, and so much of our leadership interviews and leadership calls, and especially in the remote working times, there was so much of a social media exposure that was happening. So how geared are we in terms of our social media policy, and how aware are our people of what to speak, when to speak, what not to speak? So these are the kind of things where we pick up the triggers. These are probably in some organizations, these might be the mainstream audits. I'm not sure of that. But these are some of the examples where we have gone out of the way and kind of taken the pulse of what is the call of the hour at that point of time, and picked up these reviews and blended them in some form in the audit programs. And that has actually helped us give good results. Yeah, so
Great.
that's it from my end.
Wonderful,
Thank you so
Anuja. I
much.
think, yeah, wonderful. You've given us a complete bird's eye view. I was just thinking that I'm sitting in the L&T Infotech office, listening to you talk about Persistent, but very beautifully explained. So the first question that I had triggered from the first slide or second, maybe the second slide, where you said that Persistent has about 17,000 employees. Now, and you very correctly said that HR cost is almost like a material cost in a manufacturing industry. So what is there anything special about HR audits, or would you like to elaborate a bit on the HR audit if you can?
Sure. So, as you know, as we are rightly speaking, people management is the crux of, or is the largest cost in my P&L. HR in Persistent or HR in any IT industry would essentially be called as talent management, because it's a business function. It's no longer an enabling function, or it's no longer just a recruitment or a HR operations that probably happen in the manufacturing or any other setup. It's an absolute business function, as critical as a business function. Correct. So there are two aspects to a HR function besides recruitment and HR operations. It's talent acquisition, which is our recruitment, and then there is talent management, which is in simpler terms known as resource allocation, as to which resources with which skill sets are available for which projects and where they need to be allocated. So the audits that we carry out for this kind of a setup are very, very critical. These are business audits where utilization of resources. Now, billing is the crux, right? I bill a resource and that's my revenue. If I have a resource sitting on a bench, then that's a loss for me. So that's called as my utilization. So what are the efforts that the business units are taking to keep the utilization at an optimum level? It should not be too high also, because then in that case, we are at a burnout. We do not have any cushion left. So what is the utilization that's happening, whether it is optimum? If we are having consultants on board, what's the right proportion of consultants versus fixed resources? Because naturally consultants on bench is a sure shot recipe for disaster. And then business units are very smart in actually kind of, camouflaging all this utilization. So what is the right mix? So these are I would say, offbeat or industry specific audits that we very, very regularly carry out. Then also the margins, how the margins should be controlled, how the margins should be monitored. When you're placing a resource, see what happens is, when I get a resource in, when my recruiter gets a resource in, there is always a approval matrix for proving the margin that the resource would be making. That is the bill and the buy rate, the sell and the buy rate, and the margin that would be there. What happens is that the moment the resource is put up for a different project or allocated to a different project, whether this process is being followed. So these are some of the loopholes which can easily slip and skip. So there have to be processes, there have to be regular reviews of these kind of things. What we as internal audit have done is, we work very closely with the planning team, the revenue team, and we have set up models and internal controls, checks and balances at every step of a resource allocation or a talent management activity, to try and avoid these kind of loopholes. And that is something which we then kind of review on an autopilot mode as we move ahead. I mean, this is something which is unique to IT, as I explained, IT industry. The regular HR operations and recruitment audits keep happening anyway.
Great. Yadavji.
Yeah. Initially you mentioned, Anuja, if we take three functions: delivery and operations, compliance, and information security.
Right.
For delivery in an IT company, these are the main, structures, because entire delivery mechanism is based on delivery and operations, compliance, and information security. That's what customers would want.
Right.
And you said that, you have auditors which report to these functional heads, the delivery operations head, the compliance head, legal and compliance head, and the information security, the CISO, and
Right.
you work there as auditors there. But at the same time, you said you do the planning, for them, but they have a metric structure like you, they report back into the heads, plus they report back into you, and you do the final reporting to the audit committee for the reports. So if you have got auditors based out of these functions, then you do not have those 5 auditors as a team members. You have 5 plus all these auditors who are actually working in these processes, right? First, and how do you manage to avoid conflict, because they in turn also report to the process heads, and then they report to you, and you make the final reporting to the audit committee. So how does it work? Because this is something unique which I have not seen in even IT companies, because IT companies have their own set of quality auditors, but they do not report to the chief internal auditor or chief audit executive. This was something very unique which has come out. So just throw some light on how do you avoid conflict, how do you do the reporting?
Sure. I'll speak about that. But just one small clarification here. None of these auditors or none of these function heads have any reporting responsibility with me. Okay. It is just the way that we are structured. I mean, officially, none of them report to me, nor am I officially responsible for any of their, tasks or work. It is just that I am their gateway or their entry point to update the audit committee and the board of what is happening within these functions, and if at all there are any red flags and alerts. Now, owing to this, as I said, that I'm involved in their planning. It's not that they need my approval to plan their audits. That's not how it happens. But definitely whatever they have planned, whether that is in alignment with what we had reported in the earlier quarter or in the earlier year, I provide inputs only to that extent. But yes, it's very unique to Persistent, where we provide a holistic update and a holistic review of what different assurance functions are doing within Persistent to the audit committee. These functions are absolutely independent. They work on their own and they are aligned to the CEO office in different capacities. I mean, CEO or CFO or the chief general counsel, as it may be in case of compliance. So that alignment is like any other organization. But for the findings, or within these groups, they have their own audit teams, very small audit cells, as we call them, who independently review what's happening. And to that extent, the reporting happens to the audit committee. Yes, it's unique. It probably might sound slightly complicated as well, but that is how it works. That is how the audit committee gets a holistic view of not only the operational audits or not only what's happening on the IFC front, but also as an organization where we are in terms of our delivery operations excellence, our quality audits, our information security, data privacy, all of that.
Remote auditing must be one of the, your skills, because you've got a small team, the canvas is large, the number of locations that Persistent operates is huge. Would you like to tell us a little bit about remote auditing as well?
Sure. Yeah. So, yes, we are a global audit team and we are all based out of Pune. So as long as we had to audit the India locations, we used to travel and everything was fine. Global audits the global centers have grown exponentially, especially in the last couple of years. And that's actually when the pandemic has hit and travel has not become possible. So what we have done in that scenario is we work very closely with the finance and operations team over there. Yes, we do include even our overseas subsidiaries in our audit plans. We have done that I would believe all of my US subsidiaries and even for my Europe subsidiaries. What we do is we then speak to the finance and operations heads of those locations. We try and engage into a local consultant. Basically, one advantage that we have, Satishji, is that most of the finance or HR team members operate out of India. That's one advantage that we have. But having said that, certain things definitely have to be reviewed locally. So for that, we work with how we would work with any other, co-sourced or external consultant.
Right.
We depend on the finance and operations team there. We explain what is our, they bring us the consultants to explain what is our requirement. So we drive that from here. Me and my team drives that from here. But we also get a flavor of what is the local culture, what are the local requirements in these locations through those local consultants over there.
Super. Very nice. Yeah, Divji.
I think you talked about agile audit. There is a 3-year plan and then you have 1-year plan, but you can, change depending on what is needed by the organization. Again, in the slides we talked about, in the presentation, we talked about, inputs from the top management or, consultative process that you have got. So all that is yielding a lot of value. But how does, when you do an agile audit and when you have a plan, how does the plans, what audits to do, or what is, audit there in the plan gets, what has to get dropped, what has to be audited, and if you have an agile audit and what is needed by some consulting in terms of as a consulting input, to the internal audit by the processes, then how do you deliver? So who decides that, the buck stops at you or it goes to the audit committee, and, the judgment which was taken to drop something and do something, was it optimal for the organization? Let's talk about, the effectiveness of internal audit. So how does that work according to you?
Yeah. So the buck does not stop at one single person, if I may say so. So my annual audit plan, it's not that we are completely off the radar and nothing is on the plan. We do have a 3-year audit plan, and we do largely map what are the audit areas that definitely need to be covered in terms of priority, that what needs to be done every year, what needs to be done once in 2 years, and what needs to be done once in 3 years. Now that's depending on what is the situation today or in this year as I see it. As the time and quarter on quarter goes and as the time evolves, some of the things which we thought were okay to be done once in 3 years, sometimes we drop depending on, they not being that important or the situations having changed. Sometimes we even prepone them. So this is a joint discussion taken, an absolute informed decision taken in discussion with the CFO, taken with the CEO. Of course, I would say my inputs probably matter the most because they depend on me as to how I'm going to be able to fit the audit program, fit all of the key areas into the audit program. But I've been lucky to have a very good audit committee, a very supportive one, a very supportive CFO, CEO. So we work around that. And what happens is some of the engagements, like I was talking about this remote working conditions or, so those are probably not in the plan when we initially present the plan, even before the quarter for that matter. But things which we would have included as we moved along in intermittent discussions with the audit committee chairman, I generally then sound him that these are a couple of additional things that we are doing. So some of them probably don't even get reported directly in the audit committee. They may stop at the pre-AC discussions itself. They may not be as key or needing the attention of the audit committee. So this is how we manage. We, as we move along, and as we said, it's agile. So as we move along, we take a call as to what needs to be reported at what level. And that is how we do it. And definitely we don't compromise on what are the key factors or what are the key audit areas that need to be managed.
Great. Thanks.
Wonderful. I think, Anuja, you could have gone on and on the way you structured your department. 5 years, you seem to have done a lot in the company, which is very good. So just to bring an, just to conclude the entire show in terms of the key takeaways, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm sure this is going to resonate with all the people who have been, who will ultimately listen to this. Resilience, relationships, reinvention. I think each of these 3 words have a lot of, it's a vague, all are vague words, they have a lot of interpretations, a lot of meanings to it. The alignment of your reporting with the delivery and ops excellence team, the info security and the compliance office. I think the way in which it is structured, I felt was pretty unique. Your quarterly reporting protocol, that is, to the AC chair, to the CNMD, to the senior leadership, the pre-audit committee discussions that you have with the businesses and the audit committee chairman is perhaps not emulated elsewhere. Your new word which you coined of an external internal audit also has been pretty nice, because it does, as you very rightly said, it brings understanding preconceived notions. You talked about managing expectation. Deep positive intent is what you wanted. Empathy and assertiveness, and the right balance between empathy and assertiveness. 360-degree thinking and focus on what you need to do rather than what more than what you need to be. And this is why I think one of the key learnings that I had got. The strong in-house team and the way you really brought it out versus a industry accepted practice of a COSO's team, having a right mix, which you talked about, the way you beautifully explained about having an insider who's been there with the company for a long time, having an industry expert in, and then having people with the technical background, learning, unlearning, learning and relearning, open mind, getting experts where necessary, team, analyzing, doing a peer review, peer competition review, I would say, is also something which is good. Your internal brainstorming sessions, I'm sure, is working well for you. The wonderful way that you explained of how you use audit reports. You just don't have one audit report, but you have a different split of the audit reports depending upon the what you call the recipient's mindset. I think that was another beautiful word that you seem to have coined. At least I had not heard that before. Your concepts of risk-based auditing and how agile they need to be, which Vijay, of course, asked you a question on, of how you need to be agile, you need to change according to the way the businesses have changed. You also demonstrated how the business has changed over such a long period, over a short period of time, and how we need to be nimble-footed as well. And therefore, you need to keep changing hats. And if you have to do it, you better do it well. Your right mix and use of advisors and consultants is the other good thing that I learned, your agile approach, and aligning audit services with the various activities that you talked about of immigration, visa. And I know the importance of how this immigration and visa rules are, because if you make one small mistake somewhere, it's a huge reputation loss. Yeah. And employee safety, workplace, employee grievance handling mechanism, which is pretty high in an IT company, including treasury operations in your audit plans, and your preparedness for remote working, and be reactive, not just be reactive, but also be proactive. So Anuja, your second name is Persistent. That's what I could see. I like the way you kept on saying my company, my director, my CFO, and I think in 5 years' time, you have really been, a great resource to Persistent. I also get
that's what probably Persistent does to you.
Yeah,
true, I think they make you their own.
Yeah, true. I also know your CFO very personally. We having worked together in L&T.
Right.
So it's very nice to have have you on this program. We are recording this on the International Women's Day. So it's right. It's only right that you have come here as the first woman CS Chief Audit Executive for this program. So all the very best to you on behalf of Sama and on behalf of both Dibji and me personally in all your future endeavors. And may you be not only a good CAE, but one of the best CAEs in the country and in the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I also wish Anuja all the very best, because you are, as Satish rightly pointed out, you are the first Chief Audit Executive, a woman Chief Audit Executive to be with us in this session. And we'll have many more in future.
Definitely.
I think what is Satish has beautifully summed up, all that is done by you. A lot of things are being carried out, wonderful things in internal audit. I think two things which are, Satish, I take your liberty to point out is very strong interaction with all your stakeholders, and number two, a deep desire to learn from inside and outside. These two things stand out, which will be a great learning to all the internal audit fraternity. Thank you very much, Anuja. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Thanks
a lot,
It's a
sir.
privilege.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.